Contrast is a quintessential part of photo editing. It brings detail and pop into flat, dull images, and it also allows you to create mood and drama inside of your environment. With On1 Photo Raw, you can easily create luminosity masks to target specific contrast in specific areas of your scene. Let's jump into Photo Raw and build mood, drama, and detail using luminosity masks and some creative editing. If you enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for new photo editing tips, courses, and much more. So I'm inside of Photo Raw, and I'm in the edit module with this raw landscape image. Now we can see that it's a bit dull and a bit flat, and that's sort of just inherent to raw images in general. And that's actually a great thing because then we can mold that neutral looking image into whatever we want it to be. But a great way to apply a bit of contrast and eliminate some of that flatness is with luminosity masks. Now with luminosity masks, you can use them on anything in Photo Raw that allows masking, which is pretty much everything, but I like to use them with my local adjustments. So to add in a bit of contrast to the sky and the foreground separately, let's go into our local adjustments tab here. With this first local adjustment, let's rename this darker. We're first going to modify these darker tones in the foreground and in the mountains here with the luminosity mask to apply a bit of contrast, warm it up, add some vibrance, and just make it a bit more interesting. So to create the luminosity mask, I'm just going to go into my masking options, and I'm going to go down here to Lumen. It's first going to target the brighter areas. Whenever we select Lumen, it's going to target the brighter areas in the scene by default. We can see that by all of the white up here in the sky and the whites, and the foreground area where it's a bit dark, we have dark grays and blacks in here where it's concealing this local adjustment. So what we want to do is we want to invert this because we want this to target this foreground area. We want the white of the mask. Remember, white reveals and black conceals. We want the white of this mask to be on our foreground, and we want the darker areas of the mask to be on the sky, those brighter areas. So to modify the mask a bit more and target more specific tonal ranges, we're going to head down here to the levels slider. With the levels slider, we can adjust where the mask is applied to. So with this far left handle, this is going to modify the shadow tones. The middle handle here is going to modify the midtones. And this right handle is going to modify the highlights. So I'm going to grab this far left handle, my shadow tones, and if I pull this to the right, it's going to incorporate more of the mask into those tones. And then if I pull this mid-tone handle, this middle one, to the left, it's going to remove the mask from those tones. But you can see that if I pull those mid-tones to the right, it's incorporating the mask into those tones. But again, we just want it applied to these darker areas in our foreground. So now let's grab our highlights and we'll pull that to the left as well. It will remove that from the sky area. We can maybe leave in a little bit. Let's just remove it all. So now it's only applied to the foreground. So now if we view this photo here, it's using the darken local adjustment. You can see we have our exposure at -1. So it's going to be darkening that area. Let's just reset this and let's go into this more menu and let's choose contrast. Now obviously it's pretty intense, but what we can do here is we can modify this to our liking. So let's pull back on the contrast a little bit. Let's head down here to our structure. It could use maybe a bit more structure in there. And then let's warm the foreground up just a hair. And then let's increase the vibrance to give it a bit more color. So now with this one local adjustment here, targeting the foreground, we've applied this style. And you can see it adds just a bit more pop and a bit more mood to that foreground area. So now let's add another adjustment. And we'll rename this one Brighter. We're going to be using this one to target the brighter tones. We'll go into the masking options again, and we'll choose Luminosity. Then we'll view the mask, and we can do the same thing we did before with our level slider. Now the level slider for the brighter local adjustment is going to work a bit differently. And the reason I say that is because remember we inverted that mask beforehand. Now because we inverted that mask, the level slider worked the opposite of how it's going to work with our brighter local adjustment. So in this levels slider scenario where we're just targeting the brighter tones and we haven't inverted the mask, when we pull a point to the right, it's going to remove the mask from those tones. And if we pull a point to the left, it's going to incorporate the mask into those tones. So let's pull the shadow point to the right. That's going to remove this brighter local adjustment from the foreground, which is exactly what we want. And then we're going to pull the mid-tone point to the right a little bit. Probably just until we get all of that bottom foreground removed. And then let's pull this highlight point to the left, and that's going to increase the mask on the sky area. And maybe we can modify it a bit to get more of that sky. So we'll pull the mid-tone to the left. Just like that. So now if we view this photograph, again, it's using that darken preset because that's the default local adjustment style. But let's just reset that. And let's modify the contrast and the whites, the structure, and the haze to bring in a bit more style to the top as well. So I'll pull up on the contrast. I'll head down to the whites and I'll give them a little bit of a boost until I see true white. So right before true white, right there. Then we're going to bring in some structure and we'll remove some of the haze. So now if we turn off this brighter local adjustment layer, you can see it adds in a bit more detail to that bottom area. It tames some of that bright area in the sky, but we still have a bit of that white poking through for some nice contrast and some pop. So if we go down here to our preview bar, let's check out the before and after. So here's before and here's after. And that's just from using a couple luminosity masks, targeting specific areas in the scene and adding in some contrast and some style. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot about contrast and luminosity masks and how to apply them to your images inside of Photo Raw. I'll see you in the next lesson.